Chapter 14. Eleazar. They could see them coming when they were far down the plain, the cohorts of the 10th Legion, Galenus' own, winding up the steep pass like an armed snake with the heavy wagons of their siege train. The Jews on the walls of the citadel could see them too, and from the camp their shouting could be faintly heard, and their tiny figures were black against the evening sky. "We'll see what Eleazar makes of that lot," said the tribune with satisfaction. It seemed a long time since their first sortie. Summer was over, and they had got to know their enemies rather better, particularly the Eleazar of whom Nicanor had spoken back at home in Philadelphia, who had led all the raids into the town. But Philo had not seen him. He had not left the camp. In a few days his bruises had faded, and the tribune had completely forgotten the incident. But Philo had not. Something had changed in him that day. He did not know what. There was nothing he could do about it for the moment, for he could not leave the siege yet any more than an enlisted soldier. Whatever the end was, he would see it now, and the thought of it never left him. He was beginning to understand the hate in Nicanor's heart. By the time it was dark, the small camp had turned into a large and noisy city of tents, and there was a new officer in command, Lucilius Bassus, legate of Judea. A larger staff tent had been pitched further down the slope, and Philo felt strange, looking at the campfires and smelling the smoke and stink of a whole legion. Conan found him easily. "I didn't know Sosthenes' foot were here yet," said Philo, hugging the tall, strange soldier who had come in from the dark. Fulvius heard voices, came through to look, and then left them together. "You don't know everything." They looked at each other. There was too much between them to be covered easily by words. The death of a city and its people, and the ache, like a wound that throbs on and on, of Nicanor across the valley, in the fortress like a fang against the sky. "You haven't seen him?" asked Conan. "No. After the first sortie, I haven't been allowed to leave the camp. I did try, but it didn't work, and he beat me." Conan made a move as if to touch his brother, and then let his hand fall. His eyes were very tired, Philo noticed, sunk deeper now, as his father's had been after many days in the searing light of the desert. But it had been something else which had changed Conan. "Nicanor made his own choice," he said. "He doesn't have to be in Machaerus. I suppose we don't have to be here either. Except once I enlisted. I didn't have any say in where I was sent, first Jerusalem and then here." "Was it as bad as everyone said?" Conan put out a hand again, almost as if to ward off the question. "If I knew how to make you see it in your mind, I wouldn't. And we weren't in the worst. You get used to some things, but others stick in your mind. How people look when they throw themselves off a blazing wall, and there was a woman who'd— No, why tell you?" "What will happen to Machaerus?" asked Philo. "We shall take it. Then there'll be a massacre. Bad or not, quite as bad depending on how long the siege takes. First, we've got to prepare the ground. Bassus wants that dip in the neck of the land down to the lower gate filled in so he can get his siege engines up close. From the look of this valley, that's going to mean back-breaking work for someone. I shan't get free to see you often." He got up and walked back to the awning outside the tent, his arm round his brother's shoulders, and they stood looking down over the camp. Conan pointed to a row of campfires over to the north and a smaller camp across a shallow ravine. The moon was more than half full, and the tents showed up clearly. "Look, we're over there, but don't try to find me unless it's life or death. Some of Sosthenes' foot are pretty rough. I know where you are." A voice from the shadows called his name, and Quintus came into the light of the lamps, a stocky, dark young man. "Don't forget we're on guard duty for the second watch. So you are here, Philo. We wondered. It's better than Jerusalem so far, but not by much." "There are hot springs in the cliffs on the south side," said Philo. "I hear it's almost like the baths." "After a few days carting rocks for Bassus, we shall need them," said Quintus. "Come on, Con." Philo stood looking down the hillside toward their tents a long time after the two young men had gone. It was good for once what lay ahead, not to be quite alone. It was some days before the engineering began in earnest. The land around Machaerus was rocky, the cliffs scoured smooth by the sand-laden desert winds, and wagon loads of stone and gravel had to be brought from higher up the pass. Then the work began, and with it more sorties from the citadel. The defenders could see what would happen when the ramp was finished. Philo watched them from the hillside opposite, the little dark figures swarming down through the opened gate, trumpets sounding down at the bridge, the shouting growing fainter as the guards ran into the town and the fighting was hidden between the high walls of the twisting streets, then the last of the rear guard falling back on the citadel. They were small attacks but irritating, and Bassus, the legate, fumed at the delay. He had more than enough of Judea and wanted to make an end. Soon the men of the 10th Legion knew Eleazar as well as Galenus's men did. He was tall for a Jew, with dark curly hair, exceptionally skilled at the hit-and-run fighting that was all that was left to him for the moment. He knew the town. He and his men could appear and disappear without warning. There must be other ways down from the walls than the main gate, but the Romans never found them. Finally, Bassus put a price on his head that would have brought a legionary a farm and sat back to see what that would do. It was on the 17th day of the main siege that Eleazar was careless. The first Philo knew about it was when the shouting spread through the camp. He had stopped watching the fighting now. Sometimes prisoners were brought in, and he was one of the interpreters whose job was to be at their questioning. It was a brutal business, young Jews usually wounded with death in their eyes but still able to suffer and be afraid. Each time there was the sickening fear that the next man might be Nicanor. After the first he had cried himself to sleep, but as Conan said, you got used to most things, in one way at least. Philo had been working. There was more than enough for him to do now, and it helped to go to bed tired when a different sort of noise started. It was far away, almost at the bridge at first, then spreading up through the camp. If he had ever been outside an arena where gladiators were fighting, he would have known what it was at once. Then Galenus burst through the tent flap. "Eleazar, we've got him! Come on, you're wanted!" As he pushed his way down the hill through the crowd of off-duty men come out of their tents to stare and cheer, he told Philo over his shoulder what had happened. "It was the reward that did it, that and Eleazar getting cocky. The attack just now was fiercer than usual, and we lost several men. They were auxiliaries, no, not your brother's lot, and they ran for it. Eleazar thought he had all the time there was. He was in no hurry to get back inside the citadel. It must stink by now. He stood there, just like Hector outside Troy, cracking jokes with the guards. They'll be the last he makes. One of our men, an Egyptian, got him from behind, and Frog marched him out of the arrow shot before anyone could find his bowstring to stop him. They're bringing him down now." Philo made to turn up the trodden path that led to the headquarters. "No, not that way. The legate wants the men on the walls to see this." They went down across the half-completed ramp and up through the lower part of the town. Guards were everywhere. Bassus was not risking a rescue attempt. At the top of the slope, but well back from the walls, was an open space. Already the headquarters staff were there, and the prisoner had been brought forward. High above, the Jewish helmets on the gate towers moved against the blazing blue of the sky. The prisoner, tightly bound, stood in silence, looking up at them. To one side, a centurion was supervising a work party who were knocking down part of a wall to leave the gatepost standing. "Wait here," said Galenus. "It looks as if you won't be wanted after all." Philo looked behind him to see if he could get away, but all the streets leading up to the hill were jammed with legionaries, peering and jostling to get a view. He was too far away to see what the legate was saying to the men around, but it seemed that the prisoner was not to be questioned after all. Bassus had some other plan in mind. The centurion had finished. He signaled to the prisoner's escort, and Eleazar was led across. Halfway there, he seemed to know what was waiting for him, and started to struggle. A kind of wailing sigh went up from the walls as he was stripped and tied to the wooden framework. Philo knew what would happen now, and he could not bear it. He had been with the army long enough to have seen men flogged before. But this would be different, not a punishment, but an execution. All he had felt about Rome so long before, all Nicanor had said in Philadelphia, flooded back into his mind as he turned and burrowed wildly into the crowd. Pure hatred of Rome gave him the strength to fight his way down through the mass of sweating, heaving bodies to be away from the noise of the whip that sounded loud in the silence that now lay above the walls, out of earshot before the first whimpering cries came. Then he was through the crowd and out near the bridge. He took a few steps up the hill and realized that he couldn't go back. He had run away, and the tribune would show no mercy either. If Eleazar was conscious later, they might still want him to question the prisoner. He turned to the left and ran down between the rows of tents to the north ravine where Sosthenes' men were in the camp. There were a few people about. Those who were not in the town were watching as well as they could from higher up the slope. Only bored guards shuffled and yawned, waiting for their replacements. Philo was lucky. Quintus was on duty. He took one look at the boy's face and saw this was no time to argue. You look like trouble. Conan's over in the city. I can't go back. Can't I wait somewhere out of sight? Like that? Is it? Oh well, third tent on the left in the second row. There shouldn't be anyone there except a man with a flux, and you can tell him who you are. Philo squatted on Conan's bed roll in the hot, smelly tent, and had time to think what he had done. The man lying opposite was noisily asleep, moaning and snoring. What was Eliezer to him? A name his brother had followed. The man, more than any other of the defenders who had prolonged the siege, had kept them all here in the scorching valley, and had dragged out hope beyond what it could bear. His end had come, up there outside the citadel, before friends and enemies together, a slow, humiliating agony, and because of it Philo knew that he too had now crossed the boundary against Rome, that he was now one of the ones who must run. But he was a very small pebble in the landslide this death had started. Once he was clear up the camp, no one would follow him. Marius Galenus would rage and have a partial search made if he had time, and that would be that. The only problem was where Philo was to go and how he would get there. He got up and went to the door of the tent, but it faced the wrong side, and he could see nothing. It was not long after noon. How long would Eliezer take to die? An hour later, Quintus was relieved and came to look for him. I don't know what's going on or what we're going to do with you, he said, gazing at Philo with dismay. I'll see if I can find your brother. Philo lay down and looked up at the dirty leather roof of the tent. Flies were buzzing, and there was the high whine of a mosquito. The time passed slowly. He did not get up to look out again, even when he heard the sound of men coming back through the camp. This was the only place that offered the smallest hope of safety, and he did not want to be seen. It was late afternoon when Conan pushed aside the door flap and came into the tent. Come on, quick, they're coming back. You can't stay here. Philo followed him out, ducking under guy ropes between the close-pitched lines up the slope behind the camp, past the stink of the latrines into the shelter of some scrubby bushes. Conan squatted down as far out of the sun as possible and looked wearily at his brother. Whatever have you done now? Run away. I can see that. Galenus will have the hide off you, you little idiot. Why? Philo didn't answer that. Is he dead? I saw the beginning and I couldn't watch. I see. Conan looked at his brother thoughtfully. So that was it. No, he's not dead. Oh, Jupiter, Abbasus is a fiend, but he's clever. Well, he flogged Eliezer, you know that bit. The Jews must know what happens to prisoners, but out there in front of them with his friends looking on made it, not worse, harder to bear, I suppose. They made a fair mess of him and then cut him down and left him lying there, and Bassus ordered a cross to be set up, where there was a good view from the walls. There, you've never seen a crucifixion? It starts bad and doesn't get any better. To watch someone you know, Bassus knew it would have an effect. When they were ready, he had Eliezer hauled up and taken over to have a good look. He'd done his best till then, taken it pretty quietly. I suppose he thought it would be over soon, but it can last for days, the cross. Bassus stood and looked down at him, on the ground bleeding, and said, It needn't happen. You can stop it. I didn't see that bit. I was too far away, but it must have been horrible. Eliezer eased himself up and looked back at the walls and tried to speak. His voice wouldn't carry, so they took him a lot closer, and then someone shouted up what he wanted to say. What could he say? He told them to surrender. Oh no! After all they'd been through? I suppose he only really understood what was happening for the first time when they strung him up to the gate post. Soldiers never think they may get hurt or captured, only that they'll be killed outright, and they don't mind that to start with. Now he can't escape what was coming to him. Neither could they. Rome would win in the end, and death suddenly wasn't the answer. He no longer wanted to die, and only could save him. But they couldn't give in. He was only one man. So many have already died. Conan said flatly, Did you see him close? I did once in the fighting. He was handsome. There was something about him. I'm not surprised Nicanor could talk of no one else. Oh yes, they've surrendered. They march out tomorrow, though where to only the gods know. Then it's over. The siege is finished. I can go home. Nicanor can too. But Philo saw his brother's face. Is it really over? Wait till tomorrow. As for Nicanor, he was one of the men who came out to carry Eleazar into the citadel when the talking was over. I saw his face quite close to. It isn't over for him.